Welcome to TOAMagic.com's Auction of the People pre-stream. We're breaking down the 8 decks that will be featured in this exclusive event for the top 8 players in our EE6 leaderboard. These are all decks that have won a Grand Prix in the Legacy format in the past 12 years. That said, let's get to some decks.
And here we have Reanimator, piloted by Andres Muller, to take down Grand Prix Madrid in 2010. This was after the release of Worldwake, and notably pretty close to the banning of Mystical Tutor, which this deck features as a 4 of. So other than the namesake, what is the game plan of this strategy?
This deck was one of the impetuses of the banning of Mystical Tutor, this and the prevalence of Storm. This deck was not fair, this deck is not forgiving, this deck is aggressive. Compared to the Reanimator decks that you're going to see today, this deck is still capable of putting a large creature in the graveyard, bringing it back as early as turn 2. But what this deck doesn't do is it doesn't play Lotus Petal. It doesn't say I'm going to combo off right now. It says every game that you play me, I'm going to have it on turn 2. Every game. I have 4 Mysticals that allow me to find whatever card I need to get there. I have the Brainstorms and whatnot to see a lot of cards, and I'm going to have it on turn 2.
Yeah, it's interesting that Ponder was a card at this point. It was you could play with Ponder if you chose to, but just only has the Brainstorms and Mystical Teachings or Mystical Tutor rather as deck manipulation.
And 4 Careful Study.
Yeah, but yeah, Mystical Tutor is the best Ponder every time. Just always find your card. So what are some of the interesting main deck choices? I know this was before the printing of Grizzlebrand, so we didn't have the actual best Reanimator target, but we have a split of 2 Inkwell Leviathan, 2 Iona, Shield of Emeria, an Imperial Archangel, a Blazing Archon, and a Sphinx of the Steel Wind.
So the cool thing about Mystical Tutor and Entomb, this was a little bit after the unbanning of Entomb and Legacy as well, is that this deck is generally going to be able to find the big creature it needs most of the time. That's going to give it a lot of game against the field, in that some of these decks can't beat Imperial Archangel. I think Imperial Archangel is going to be fairly good against most of the field here. Blazing Archon is a problem for a deck like the Flash deck that we saw. Goblins, again, this Goblins deck doesn't have a great way to beat Blazing Archon. And Inkwell Leviathan is the blue decks. There's no Wrath of Gods in this format.
Yeah.
So being able to find the proper big creature for a given situation is probably going to make the difference. This deck is incredibly strong now.
Yes. So speaking to the strength of the deck, how difficult would you say it is to pilot at a maximum efficiency?
This deck has the Mystical Tutor toolbox, like a lot of the other decks have that we saw that were on the tougher side, but I don't think this deck is as hard to pull off. It's a lot of cantrip optimization, but without having Ponder, Mystical Tutor is kind of like a training wheels for this deck, in that you are going to be able to pull off what you need to win. You're going to have a little bit of counterspell baiting or getting your opponent to play a little bit incorrectly. In this field overall, though, you don't have Deathrite Shaman. It's just not one of the featured decks. So this Reanimator deck could probably go the distance as well.
Excellent. So how would you consider the strength of the sideboard in this?
The sideboard has a couple different creatures to bring back, in another Sphinx of the Steel Wind, another Iona, the third Iona, and a Woodfall Primus, in that we have a couple more outs to some problems. There's one main deck Show and Tell, and the 4 Mystical Tutors means that if we need Show and Tell, we're going to be able to get Show and Tell on time, every time. So I think that the sideboards really need to give it enough game against any of these other decks. Most of the other decks don't have a bunch of graveyard hate either. So this is really like one of my 2 picks.
Yeah, and Mystical Tutor finding a lot of your sideboard utility cards too is just so powerful. So considering the card Reanimate in your deck can make you lose a high number of life points, how do you think the lives and cards auctioning will go for this deck?
I think someone is going to be faced with a really tough choice, and the sub game here is really interesting. So if I say 4 cards, 12 life, or 5 cards, 12 life, let's say 5 cards, 12 life, what is your next bid? Are you going to say 5 cards 11 life? And if you say 5 cards 11, I don't think I can say 5 cards 10. The big creature you bring back is Iona, and Iona's a 9-drop. And as well as Inquisition. So if you have a Force of Will or a fetch on your opening hand that you need to play, starting at 11 is probably not good. I think 12 is going to be the hard cap. I think someone's aggressively going to just bid 5 cards, 12 life, and force someone to say, I'm willing to go to 4 for this deck. With Mystical Tutor, though, as well as Dark Ritual in the main deck, being able to Mystical for a Dark Ritual and then just combo off with the other 2 cards on 1 land, this deck might be good enough at 4 cards.
Yep, this deck seems incredibly powerful. I'm very glad we don't have to play against it in current Legacy. So yeah, there we have it. Andreas Muller's Reanimator deck from Grand Prix Madrid of 2010.